So it's been a little bit of a break. Just to recap, we were where we were holding and what we'll be covering today. We had discussed at length the various fruits and vegetables which are blacklisted due to high infestation and not being practical to wash and check. But we did mention that one of the ways that these can be consumed is if they are blended, either in a smoothie or in a soup. And we had very, very briefly touched on that. Today we're going to expound on that more, discuss all about the idea of blending, and as well dried herbs. How does that work in regards to bugs? So the question that could be asked is, if we know there's bugs or if this thing is so infested that we cannot eat it, how does blending help? What does that make a difference? The bugs, now it's okay to eat the bugs once they're blended. So this brings us back to one of the concepts we mentioned in one of the first classes. One of the severe aspects of bugs is that bugs are not batul, cannot be nullified. Generally, something that's usur is nullified bitul b'shishim. If there's 60 times more kosher food than the non-kosher, it becomes nullified and everything is permissible. However, when it comes to bugs, even if there's a small bug and there's 60 times more food, the bug does not become batul, does not become nullified. And the reason we explained was because the bug is a beria. Beria, it's an entity of its own, and since it's an entity of its own, it cannot lose its identity by being nullified. As long as it's a complete identity, it stays the way it is, and it does not become batul. However, halacha makes an exception, that this rule that a beria, an entity cannot become nullified, is only when it's complete. The moment it's broken up, the moment it falls apart, or it's broken to pieces, it loses its identity. And then it's not anymore a unique identity on its own or entity on its own. Rather, it becomes part of the whole mix. And then we measure, is there 60 times more kosher than this bug? So when it comes to bugs, if we do something that will make the bug, that we're sure the bug will fall apart, be broken up, then we don't anymore look at the bug as its own entity. Rather, we measure, is there 60 times more food than the bug, which usually there is, and it becomes permissible. And that's where blending comes in. However, there's also a concept in halacha that ein mevatlin is l'chatchila. You cannot nullify food from the start. A person cannot say, I have this amount of non-kosher food, and I want to add it to my food. There's going to be 60 times more kosher food, so it's fine because the non-kosher will be nullified. It's forbidden to do that. Bittul only is allowed after the fact. If by mistake something fell in, then we say it becomes nullified. So how does it work by bug? If there's a bug there, or if I'm concerned there's a bug there, how can I just go and blend it and now it becomes allowed? That seemingly goes against the rule that we cannot be mevatel isur l'chatchila. We cannot from the outset go ahead and nullify something that's forbidden. We can only do so. We can only eat a food that after the fact, if something fell in, then it would be okay. So how can someone go ahead and make a smoothie or make a soup with fruits or vegetables that are infested with bugs if they know they are forbidden? How's that allowed based on that concept? So in truth, that's addressed by the Poskim, by halachic authorities, and they limit when a person could go ahead and blend a food or fruit or a vegetable produce in order to eat it. And it's not always allowed. It's only allowed in specific cases. We're going to discuss first when it's not allowed. It's not allowed, first of all, if someone saw a bug, then you saw clearly something forbidden, then you're not allowed to go ahead and blend it. In such a case, you can't, because you know just for sure something forbidden there, and by going ahead and blending it, you would be going against the rule, which you're not allowed to be mevatel something from the outset. You're not allowed to go ahead and nullify something actively. So therefore, if you saw a bug, you cannot go with that route of blending it. That wouldn't work. The next is also if something is within the category of muchzak b'tolaim, something that is almost definitely has bugs, which we explained in one of the first classes. This produce, which 51% of the time is infested. This on the Torah level, on the biblical level, is considered to have bugs in it, even if you don't see the bugs, because of the probability of having majority of it usually being infested. we consider it already having bugs, and such produce also cannot be blended because we are assuming that there's bugs, and therefore you cannot go ahead and nullify it. So when could you? You could buy produce which is in the category of miut hamatzui, which means it's not the majority of this produce is not infested, only a minority, a miut of it. However, it's common enough that the Chachamim said it's forbidden for us to consume it unless we check it. So it's not certain that there's bugs, but there's a strong probability, and because of that strong probability, the Chachamim told us we have an obligation to check it, and we're not allowed to eat until we check it. However, the fact that there's a bug there is not certain. In such a case, one could go ahead and blend it because there's no certainty that there is a bug there. And in such a case, when it's not certain, it's okay to go ahead and blend it. Some poskim add that also the blending should be part of a normal process of eating this food. So to make a smoothie, it's normal to drink smoothies, it's normal to have a soup. But if someone just wants to eat asparagus, and they just decide to blend asparagus and drink it the way it is, and that's not usually the normal way people will consume asparagus, then that would be, again, he's going out of his way to get around the Isser, the prohibition. However, if the normal way is to drink strawberries in a smoothie, raspberries in a smoothie, kale in a smoothie, or make soups with broccoli or the like, so you're just making a recipe, and as long as you make sure that your produce is not muchzik, you didn't see bugs, and it's not muchzik, it's not, the majority of it is not a chance of infestation, then you're good. But it's very hard for a person to start knowing which category is my food in. I want to make a broccoli soup. Is broccoli in the category of muchzik b'talayim, that it's almost certain has bugs, or is it in the category of miut hamatzui, assumed they're going to possibly have bugs? Because of that, it's hard to know. So it's suggested that whenever someone's going to be blending produce that usually has bugs in it, assume that it's the type of produce which is muchzik, which is the one that probably does have bugs. So what can I do in order to consume it? You first have to bring the probability of there being bugs lower. How is that done? First, by doing a thorough soapy wash. By doing a thorough soapy wash, then rinsing off the soap, no checking, we're just washing it well and rinsing off the soap, you can assume that by now you brought down the produce chance of there being bugs to much lower than muchzik, and then that almost definitive. Rather now it's more of it's a minority, although still to eat it as is would still need checking rabbinically, but to blend it right now, since it was washed well, it brought down the chance of bugs. Now it could be blended. So whenever someone wants to approach blending fruits and vegetables which usually have bugs, instead of starting to do research if this is muchzik b'talayim or not, if you do a thorough wash and then rinse off the soap or vegetable wash and then go ahead and blend it, you should be fine halachically. So that's generally the recommended method of going about. And from that, a person can make all types of dishes, whether it's sauces like pesto, or if it's schug, or if it's going to be smoothies, or if it's soups. There can be many different types of foods. If it's a dressing, someone wants to use raspberries and make a dressing with raspberries. All that is doable as long as it's finely blended. And the question is, what's finely blended? To what extent is the blending enough? So there are different categories out there. Some say if you take a pen, and you make a little mark on the paper with the pen, that the pieces should be blended that finely. Some say you don't have to go that crazy to start seeing each piece, but as long as the mixture became liquidy, it's like now pourable, it's drinkable with a straw. It became liquidy enough that it's something that's easily drinkable with a straw or easily pourable. That means that it was blended enough that it's fine. But generally, you should try to make it as finely blended as possible, that it's pourable, and if you'd be drinking it, it would be easily to drink with a straw, or very easily poured like a liquid. How does that work? Because generally, the bugs will fall apart in such a process. Even if you look and you find little pieces of leaves, and you say if these leaves are intact, maybe the bugs are intact. But in truth, these bugs are very delicate, and the friction that happens when you're blending something is a lot of friction, a lot of movement, and usually they will fall apart, even if it's a few legs or part of the body. That usually will be enough to break it apart. So sometimes people ask, but I make a smoothie and I'll feel the strawberry seeds or the raspberry seeds. Does that mean that the bugs, which are that small, were not blended? So no, that doesn't mean that the bugs were not blended, because the strawberry seeds and raspberry seeds are very hard. They take a lot of effort to actually blend, and even to bite on it, you have to bite hard to break them. A bug, however, you just touch it lightly with your finger and it mushes. So the bugs, with all that friction movement in a smoothie or in blending, they usually will fall apart if something is blended smoothly. And finally, therefore, you don't need to be concerned. Even if you still see little pieces or you feel little seeds that were not fully blended, you could assume that the bugs are thoroughly blended and are broken up, and is not a concern. So people ask if there's any specific type of blender. There isn't really a specific type of blender. As long as it works and it's generally everything is going through the blades and is being blended, then it's fine. So we just talked about fresh produce. What if someone wants to use frozen produce? How does that work? And now within fresh produce, as we spoke in the past, organic always needs a little bit more attention. So if someone is going to be using organic produce, they should be soaking it for a little longer, doing a little bit more agitation, using a little bit more warmer water if possible, and washing off a little bit better, because it does need a little bit more attention. Now, when it comes to frozen, so in general, frozen fruits and vegetables, if they're not from Israel or China and don't have any additives that were not cooked, are acceptable without hashgacha. However, there is the concern of bugs. So if there's concern of bugs, we have to address the bug issue. So for example, if someone wants to buy frozen broccoli or frozen cauliflower or frozen chopped spinach, all these have bugs. So essentially these foods are kosher, but because of the bugs, we cannot eat them. Checking frozen produce is not so practical because it's one big mush, and it's very hard. The bugs get embedded in the mush, and it's very hard to properly check them. So if someone wants to make a broccoli soup, or they want to do something else, blend or cauliflower in a soup, or spinach in whatever that's going to be blended, then it's okay. And in such a case, you do not have to wash it, because it was already washed thoroughly, not enough to remove all the bugs, but enough to bring it to a level that you're allowed to just go ahead and blend it. So broccoli, cauliflower, anything that's coming frozen, they go through a washing already in the factory, enough to bring it down to a level that you could blend it and not have to wash it. However, if it's organic produce, you would still need to do first a wash before going ahead and blending it. This is the same for fruits. So frozen strawberries, frozen raspberries, blackberries. If you want to go ahead and make a smoothie with them, if they're non-organic, they already went through a basic wash that brings down the probability of bugs, and you could go straight ahead and blend them. If, however, they were organic, you should do a rinse and wash them first before blending them. Now, there is a myth out there that freezing things makes the bugs explode, and when they explode, they're not anymore a bug, they're not anymore a baria, and they become bottles. So some people think that you could just buy any frozen broccoli or any frozen raspberries or strawberries, because the freezing itself makes the bugs fall apart, which is, in truth, is not true. Frozen produce has been checked many times and the bugs are still intact. So that it's a freezing on its own isn't enough to get rid of bugs. Freezing on its own does not break apart the bugs. But when you buy commercially frozen things, they were already washed pretty well, enough that you can blend them if there was non-organic produce. Again, if it's organic produce, you would still want to wash it. If you want to do it at home and freeze it, so you do the same process. You take fresh produce, wash it well, and then you could freeze it, and then throw it into your smoothie whenever you want, or into a blender whenever you want, to make whatever food you want to prepare from that. people ask sometimes that when it comes to a kugel, a broccoli kugel, how does that work? So the florets, which are the parts which have bugs, those need to be blended again until they're in liquefied form, very, very finely blended. If you could still work with that and make a kugel, then that works. Otherwise, you would need to buy broccoli with a hechsher, or you would have to check the broccoli yourself, as we described in earlier classes. And as well, sometimes people ask about falafel, that someone wants to use fresh herbs in the falafel. It's the same thing. It depends how well you blend your herbs and how finely they are blended. And if they are finely blended enough that they're almost liquefied, then they could be. If not, you would need to check it before you go ahead and blend it. Fine. The next that we'll address is dried herbs. So you go to a store, you could find many dried herbs, whether it's oregano or thyme or rosemary. These are all things that when you would buy them fresh, parsley, you'll find all these dried bugs. All these dried herbs, which usually have bugs. And if you want to use them fresh, you'd have to check them. Seemingly all of them have a hechsher, and in truth, they don't even need a hechsher. They could be used without a hechsher. So the question is, where do the bugs go? These are infested herbs. How could suddenly they be okay to be used? And even when there is hashgacha, no one's checking them or washing them. Why is that allowed? So it's explained in the halacha that a bug loses its identity as a bug when it becomes dried out. Besides being broken apart, when it becomes dried out to the point it doesn't have any more moisture, it's just considered dried dust, just like dust, and it's not anymore considered a bug. So when these herbs are being dried, usually what happens to the bugs is that they reach a state that they're very, very dry, and therefore they're not anymore forbidden. Even if you would find the bug and it's so dry, it's not considered a bug anymore because it lost all its moisture. It's just considered like a speck of dust, and therefore that's why all these dried herbs are permissible. This includes as well freeze drying, because freeze drying also goes through a very hot process. So that's why you can find at times freeze-dried strawberries or freeze-dried raspberries, things which would be very hard to check and eat whole, but because they went through this freeze-dried process and the drying part went through a very high heat, which dries out the bugs, that's why they become permissible. So this is till where we'll be covering in these classes. There is a little bit more to cover. If someone wants to know a little bit more about bugs and checking, there's some classes that I gave online which can be found on the website kashrusbeintheknow.com, and the website kashrusbeintheknow.com. Over there we have a series called Veggie Bug Buddies, which will have some classes and topics which were not covered in these. And besides for that, next week we're going to be covering questions that come in. If you could please email projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. These two links that we just mentioned could be found in the chat, the website, as well as the email, and you can send any questions you have in regards to bug checking and anything connected to that. We will choose whatever is practical and whatever we can cover in the next class. If you could please send it in by Sunday so we can work on it. And that will be the next class dedicated to answering practical questions that come in regards to bug checking. Thank you very much.